When we use professionally the term value today, we usually mean two things. The first is the financial value of a company, more specifically the economic value that a company has on the market. This is the most common conceptualization of the term. The second is the social value of a company. More specifically, this means how much a company benefits the environment and society, plus the sum of relationships that it is able to establish and develop. More interestingly, recently, is that not only the financial value and market capitalization, but also the organization's social value increasingly depends on intangible elements. If in the past the overall value depended on its physical assets, the buildings, the equipments and the machineries, today the overall value depends on its intangible assets, its intellectual properties, its brand, the system of relationship, or the way in which it organizes its processes. Things we cannot touch. This is why we call them intangibles. The data are impressive. If we analyze the first 500 American companies, the ones that belong to the Standard and Poor's Index, in 1975, 40 some years ago, intangible weighted 17 of total value, while tangible assets were 83% of the value of those organizations. If we adopt the same universe and we look at 2015, the proportions are inverted. Today, intangibles within the first 500 companies are worth 87% of the total value. In other words, even considering only the financial value without considering social value, we can conclude that it is formed by 87% of intangible assets. These assets bear peculiarities and characteristics that make them unique. We live in an age in which the economy is strongly influenced by intangibles. We see this immediately by identifying the companies with the highest economic value in the world. These organizations are the ones with highest percentage of intangibles. As we say, this is the age of intangibles, an age in which they determine the majority of market capitalization. The implication is that the way of managing the organization is changing drastically because the management of intangibles is completely different from traditional management. Two scholars, Haskell and Westlake, recently wrote a book called Capitalism Without Capital, in which they affirm that today's capitalism is full of assets that even recently we would not have traditionally called assets, because we cannot calculate their physical value. Different from machineries, physical goods, real estate and financial goods intended in a traditional sense. What is even more interesting is that this book also delineated the characteristics that differentiate intangible and tangible goods. They are four and correspond respectively to four S. The first S is the one of scalability. The economy of intangibles is an economy where we can see easily drastic changes in the size of the organization. If we look at the main companies today, they are relatively recent and have undergone a process of scalability, with a consequent increase of dimensions. The second S is the one of sunk costs, because investments on intangibles are difficult to recover. If you can sell a physical good, you cannot sell in the same way an abstract one. For example, Investments in knowledge or in research are difficult to replicate in other contexts. The first S is that of synergies. Intangibles imply an economy in which the different sectors are very permeable. Today, a company that is a leader in one sector is also likely to become leader in a neighboring one. In this regard, big companies have an active role in very different and seemingly incompatible industries. The fourth S is the one of spillover, indicating that intangibles are easily imitable by other market players. This is because ideas are more easily replicable, and the ways of organizing work is also relatively easy to imitate. Those four S's, scalability, sunk cost, synergies, and spillover, are therefore characteristics that determine a management style that is completely different, characterized by high competition and high volatility. In this context, public relations become central via relationship building as well as communication. Why? Because these activities are certainly a fundamental part of intangibles. And system of relationships are also created by communication. On the one hand, relationships and system of relationships are the only intangible without spillover, the only intangible that cannot be copied easily by a competitor. This because relationship systems are unique. The relationship an organization has with its employees, with the other key stakeholders and the community are not easily reproduced or reproducible. The subject needs to invest to build them, and competitors cannot simply take or steal them. Thus, in this context, investing in public relationship implies investing in the only intangible asset of an organization that cannot be copied, the only asset that is fully proprietary, and ultimately the only asset that builds a lasting value for the organization.